Hey everyone, my name is Mario Martinez and this is Amateur EMS. So today I decided, you know what, I think it'd be a lot of fun to talk about 5 crazy calls that I've had in the past. This video has been one that's been requested quite a few times. Somebody had a really fun idea, why don't I do the salmonella approach? And I think that's a great idea, but the drawing definitely did make it take a while. So I hope you enjoy it. If you did like this video, please consider liking, commenting, subscribing. You can consider joining the Discord or even a channel member. We love our channel members. Oh, you guys are so amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. For all of these different calls, I am going to tweak a couple different little bits of facts just because I want to keep HIPAA in mind and I want to protect my patients to the best of their abilities. But for the most part, I mean, all of these calls are ones that I've actually gone through. So for the first one, I was dispatched to a fall call. It wasn't anything too serious, at least on the dispatch notes, just that some guys were working on a construction project. They were working on a house and one of them fell off a ladder. So we pulled up on scene, not a big deal. We're looking, there's one guy on the floor, 2 guys that were standing right next to him. So we're thinking, oh, okay, maybe he just fell, hurt his back. We're walking out, and I'm an EMT at the time. I'm not a medic yet. We both go up to the patient, and there were a couple of gnats out today. And I looked down at the floor, and the guy's eyes were wide open, and one of them were just covered in gnats. There were probably about 100, 200 gnats on this guy's eyes. The paramedic was doing a pulse check. And that's whenever we realized the guy that fell down was in cardiac arrest. He was currently dead at the time. And his 2 friends, for who knows how long, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, were just standing there just looking at the guy. Of course, they had no medical knowledge. And so I was like, what in the world happened here? So I ran to the medic unit. I was grabbing all my stuff. I ran back to my partner. We started working CPR. We called for backup at this time because we were like, oh man, this is a lot more serious than we initially realized. And while we were doing CPR, I'll never forget it. The 2 guys were just standing there looking at us nonchalant. I don't know if they were in shock or whatever was going on, but one guy was like, oh shit, he's dead. And I was like, yeah, man, he's dead. He's been dead this whole time. You didn't check on him? You didn't try to move him or see what was going on? And they just kind of stood and watched for a little bit. What was really interesting, though, is we ended up transporting to the hospital, and we brought him back from being an unconscious patient, no pulse, no breathing, all the way up to where he was able to talk in complete sentences. So it was an amazing call afterwards. What was really interesting about him, he basically had all the hallmarks of neurogenic shock, where he must have fallen off the ladder. He was about, I think, 3 rungs up on a ladder. He fell, hurt his spinal cord in some way to where the nervous system couldn't control his lower extremities. So let's say if it happens in the middle of your spine, from the middle of your spine down to the bottom of your feet, your body's no longer able to vasoconstrict because the nerves don't have any control anymore because the spinal cord kind of got cut off from that section. And so you'll see like the skin start to turn red in his lower half. I think there's like his blood pressure. I don't know if it widens the gap between the systolic, diastolic. I have to look it up. You're not able to vasoconstrict, so you start to dump all this excess fluid into your lower extremities while your body's trying to vasoconstrict on the top, and that's how you can go into cardiac arrest. So I thought it was a really cool call. Very odd friends. I would not want to work with them, or coworkers, I guess. But another call that I had, it was during a holiday. I won't specify the holiday, but it was a really interesting call. It was for a choking call. And so, of course, whenever you get a choking call, no matter what you're doing, this is one of the rare exceptions where you're sprinting over to the medic unit. And the brush truck was with us. We got inside the house after a minute, 2 minutes. And as I'm going inside, I'm looking at the dispatch notes beforehand. And I read that there was a nurse on scene and that the patient was choking. I was like, okay, that's good though. They can have some proper care, at least while we're heading over there. I walk into the house. There is like 3 tables set up, and when one of the tables, 2 of like I guess the uncles are still eating food. The rest of the family, they're all just kind of like looking at us. I'm looking around. I can't even tell who the choking patient is. And then one person points to a guy that's sitting down on the side of the room, and he's the one who's just choking. He's got like some muscular issues to where he can't properly chew by himself, and so he's choking on a sausage currently. And I'm like, okay, who's the nurse, right? So I run up to the patient, I grab him, I throw him onto my legs to where I have one leg in between both of his. I'm doing the Heimlich maneuver. I'm hitting doing back slaps to try to get the choking food out. He's going semi-conscious. I've done a couple rounds of it, and I'm telling a family member, hey, go ahead and get some cloth so I can stick it in his mouth later if I need to. I'm working on the Heimlich maneuver. I got a couple things going in my head. My partners are bringing my stuff. I tell the paramedic that's next to me, hey, go ahead and get the Magil forceps to me. They act as like forceps or like as clamps. By the way, the nurse was just sitting down next to the guy, and I don't even know what was going on with her, but it is what it is at this point. I don't even care. We're doing the Heimlich maneuver. He's going unconscious. He starts to go down towards the floor. So then I start working on him. I know that CPR is something that we're going to eventually have to move to, but I open up his mouth. I stick the cloth on the side of his mouth, like the tablecloth, so that way I have like a little bit of room to work with while I stick the Magil forceps in his mouth. And I go for like a blind sweep. And while I'm doing that, I'm kind of like stimulating the uvula. I'm trying to get him to maybe puke or something at the same time, just to push the obstruction out of the way. And I go for kind of almost like a blind grab. Don't get anything. I go in again and I pulled out the obstruction. So I was very thankful for that. It ended up being a piece of sausage. And what was really cool about the sausage in this one was, if you think about a decent sized piece of sausage, it isn't usually, there's like a just like this chewed up mass, right? And so whenever I was doing the Heimlich maneuver, the whole thought process is you're trying to build up pressure while you're doing a Heimlich maneuver. That's great, and it usually works, but for the sausage, what I imagined instead of a complete obstruction was it was a partial obstruction. So a tiny bit of air pushed out every time I did the Heimlich maneuver, which is really bad because I'm not able to generate enough pressure that I normally would be able to dislodge the object, right? So that's why we with those kind of patients, usually you encourage him to chalk, but he wasn't able to because of his medical history, and so had to work down towards. Luckily, I grabbed it out with the Magil forceps. I really got lucky. But then afterwards, if that didn't work, I could consider getting a endotracheal tube, which we use for intubations, to stick down into his vocal cords if he went unconscious, and I could actually push the food further into his mouth, and I could further push it into his trachea. There's two different stems for your lungs. There's the right bronchus and the left bronchus. The right one's slightly bigger and it's a little bit higher, or it's a little bit closer than the left one. So I could push the obstruction into his right lung. I could breathe for him for his left lung, and technically I could do that to keep him sustained until I get to an ER. That is an option, but it's not a great one. Regardless, we still always push to go to the ER because who knows if a little bit got into his lungs, especially with his neurological deficiencies at the time. So always want to make sure that we push for transporting to a hospital if we have a choking patient or if we have a drowning patient, just to make sure we clear up anything. We don't cause any widespread bacterial infection if any food gets in the lungs. The next one, we got dispatched to a call. I remember it has been raining the past couple of days, so it's pretty wet, and it was for a light pole. And so we were like, oh, okay, maybe something's going on. We went in I think it was the engine that time. And whenever I showed up on scene, it was a Spanish-speaking patient, so I was having some difficulty translating to her, but I am able to speak somewhat decent Spanish, so I was talking to her the whole time, and it was really weird. She was acting very frantic. She seemed really worried, and then she pointed at her light pole, and I was like, okay, what about it? What's going on? Like, everything looked completely fine, and there's a cover that is, like, connected to, like, I guess a plug or something, and it's just like a little plastic cap that was slightly open, and she kept on pointing at it, and she was like, oh, blah blah blah, something about closing something, and I was like, miss, do you mean you want me to close the cap on the plug? She was like, yes, please, I'm so worried about it, da da da. And I was like, okay. And so I walked up and I closed the cap. And this is a 911 call, by the way. We're not able to respond to anything else while we're working on this. I closed the cover on it, and then she was like, she just looked at me and she said, thanks. And then she walked back into her trailer. And then that was it. That was the entire call. And I was just befuddled. And I was like, I can't believe what we just got called out for. But okay, I guess. And so we went back in service, and that was the entire call. So very weird. That patient's always been a little odd, but there's no mental deficiencies. It just kind of, some people are just weird. The last one that I wanted to talk about was really interesting because it kind of shows the issue that cops have, which is really sad on scene. So we got called for a possible hemorrhage issue. We showed up to the patient's house. There are already cops that were at the household at the time. And the guy was just standing there with a towel on his head. And there were some cops inside the house already. They were talking to him. And then I was there as well. And the cops were like, oh yeah, he potentially got shot in his forehead. We don't really know what's going on, but he needs to go to the ER. And so I take a look at him and like, yeah, hey, you need to go to the ER, blah, blah. And he's like, okay, I really respect what you're saying, blah blah, but tell these cops to beep beep beep, like tell them to get out of here. I hate them. They're so annoying. You guys need to get out of my house. And he's like super aggressive, but it was really weird because he was only aggressive to the cops. He wasn't aggressive to me. So he's yelling at the cops. He's cursing at them nonstop. The cops would say something like, "Hey man, you need to go to the ER. You're bleeding out." And then I would say, "Hey man, you need to go to the ER. You're bleeding out." And then you would look at the cops and be like, "You guys go to hell, blah blah. I don't care about what you or what you're saying." And then you look at me and you'd be like, "Hey, but I really respect what you're saying. Like, it's really nice of you." And it just shows just like how bad cops get treated sometimes. And I felt so bad for the cops because we were saying the same thing. And the thing was, every time he would yell at the cops, he would take off his towel to point at them and yell. And I'd be like, "Please put your towel back on," because he'd just start pouring blood. Every single time he'd disrupt his clot, blood would be gushing out. And I'd be like, "Hey man, put the towel back on." And he'd be like, "Oh, okay." And he'd look at the cops and say, "Ah, screw you, blah, blah." And so we had to wait there for 10, 15 minutes just arguing to him like, "You please sir, you need to go to the ER." "Oh, okay, that's really nice of you. Look, I'll talk to you alone, but you need to get these cops out of here." And I was like, "I can't do that. It's very unsafe if I do that." And so he just kept on taking off his towel back and forth. And eventually he just collapsed onto the floor. And I was like, "Okay, well, I guess now we have like implied consent. Like we can finally transport him. This guy's been arguing with the cops the whole time." And so I ended up getting one of the cops to hold pressure onto the patient's forehead. We ended up transporting him to the ER. Everything ended up being fine. I ended up getting him back to being conscious by giving him some IV fluids. But I just felt so bad for the cops the whole time because he's yelling at him, cursing. He's about to fight the cops. And they're just saying the exact same thing I'm saying over and over again. They're not even saying it in a bad tone either, but they're just taking nonstop shots from this guy. And so we end up getting him conscious while we're like transporting. We're almost to the ER. He like slightly wakes up. He looks at the cop and he's like, "Screw you." As he's holding his forehead, making sure that he's not gonna bleed out. So I was like, "Oh, I can't believe this is real. I feel so bad for these cops." It all ended up, I think, working out for the best. We ended up saving the guy, at least from my understanding. Just a sad, tough day to be a cop. You know, they're just taking nonstop beatings for people they're trying to help. But that was 5 different stories that I thought would be pretty fun to share. This is a whole different art style, whole different method of me presenting this kind of stuff. So if you did like this, please leave a comment. I may do it again in the future because I think it's kind of fun. You just kind of have to dance around HIPAA things. You know, you have to make sure that you kind of adjust some information, that you hide patient information while you're doing this. So it's a little tricky. If you did like this video though, please consider liking, comment, subscribing. Thank you so much to our channel members. Oh, we love you guys so much. You guys are so amazing. If you want to become a channel member, you can always consider doing that. Join the Discord if you want to. We love having you guys and talking. But with that being said, I will see you guys on the next one. See ya.